Welcome back everyone to another downward day. And last time on the channel, I shared with you guys a personal story of mine that sort of defined my current opinion and philosophy about the nature of work. So on today's edition of the Downward Diary, I intend to really get in to this idea, this prevailing America-defining idea that work should be treated as this unquestionable virtue. This axiomatic belief that your inherent value as an American should be determined by how much effort you put into your labor. And before we get into the discussion here, I need to clarify two things where the moment you bring up this topic of discussion, there are always like two main preemptive rebuttals that people immediately rush to go attack you with. So before people start putting words in my mouth, I just need to make these two things clear. Number one, I'm not saying in any way that you should not take satisfaction or joy or pride in whatever work or labor you may happen to do specifically. I'm in no way saying that you shouldn't derive pleasure or pride from your work. And number two, by trying to argue that work might not be as virtuous as we believe, I'm not in favor of the inverse point. I'm not trying to say that being lazy and slothful and being a leech on the community around you is somehow virtuous. Me questioning the virtue of hard work is not me endorsing the value of being lazy and being a leech. So I just wanted to get those two things out of the way, because the second you touch this subject matter, there's always people trying to put words in your mouth and try to make you claim that you're arguing for these two things. And I'm just clarifying here that I'm not. But with that out of the way, we can finally get in to what I've been planning on saying on this channel for the last 3 videos now. It's all been building up to this. And it's building up to this thing that I've labeled the boomer work ethic. And that's because this specific idea, this specific concept of sacrificing everything in the name of working hard, it's a mantra that is most often associated and repeated by people in the boomer generation. And I'll admit that it's not totally fair to pin this whole thing on the boomers. The boomers did not invent this way of thinking, but I will say that they circumstantially ended up as the last generation where this wisdom, this sort of tutelage, was at least still relevant in some way. But at least in terms of the United States of America, the working hard mantra goes back hundreds of years, possibly even to the very foundation of this nation. So I'll acknowledge here that it's unfair to pin this way of thinking exclusively on the boomers, but for our contemporary sense of society, yes, they are overwhelmingly the generation in terms of relevant people that we interact with today and have influence over society. They are currently the group of people who most strongly believe in this idea. This idea that American labor should take immense pride in simply the arduousness of the labor they perform. They love repeating this idea that a good day's work has inherent value on its own, and that you should derive personal satisfaction not even necessarily by the quality of the products that your work produces, but rather simply out of the exercise of working for long amounts of time, placing yourself in stressful situations, or doing manual tasks that are physically exhaustive to the point of personal injury. If you talk to many old people in America and ask them for their opinion on this, a majority would probably say, yes, you should take pride in the simple act of working hard. People who plunge their bodies and minds into greater and greater extents of exhaustion should feel more pride and more valor than people who take the lazy way out. With lazy in this context, pretty much just referring to you not working yourself down to the threads. In American culture, American society, for the last 40 years or so, people will tend to call you lazy for taking more time for yourself for very simple pleasures of mental and physical health. There are certain people in this country who will call you lazy for not wanting to go to work with a 102-degree fever. There are people who will call you lazy for not wanting to return to work a week after you just gave birth to a child. And over time in this country, the concept of laziness has shifted from referring to actual acts of sloth to instead referring to periods when anyone is not giving 110% to their given job of choice. And this general prevailing belief where people who bash their head against a wall trying to work so darn hard, this belief that there is explicit virtue in that particular style of life has led to an equal and opposite reaction against people who don't prefer to live that way. By placing so much valor on this extreme workaholic behavior, people must simultaneously be asked to shame those who want to take more time for themselves to enjoy periods of leisure, or to simply place themselves in less stressful situations, even temporarily. The axiom that hard work equals virtue simultaneously and logically implies that the absence of work at any given time is shameful and sinful. And at a very fundamental level, the origins of this way of thinking are not necessarily flawed. At a very basic, primal level, it is good to be useful for the community around you. It is good to provide a purpose for others where maybe you're talented in one specific thing and you can do that task better than anyone else. It is extremely useful and efficient, and it benefits the survival of others around you if you can perform that task at a high level to the benefit of others. And this way of thinking was relevant and useful for thousands of generations when human beings lived in bands or tribes of people of no more than 150 or so individuals. In that specific context, the fruits of your labor would be immediately tangible, and subsequently the absence of any labor or the slothful, genuinely lazy behavior would be much more punishing to the community around you. Like if your specific task, if your specific job in the tribe was to go out and forage for berries and nuts because you're particularly good at spotting berries and nuts, if you happen to phone it in for a day or a season and you just decided to take the day off, that would be less food for everyone to eat in the entire tribe. You would be directly passing on a burden to every single individual person around you who live immediately next to you when you go to sleep at night. And in a tribal society, surely all these other people would have some specific talent or niche that you depend on them for. And by proving yourself as a low-value individual who doesn't pull their fair share for the betterment of the tribe, you'd start to run the risk of everyone else in the tribe choosing to deprive you of resources. And your own slothful, lazy behavior would, in a roundabout way, come back to negatively affect your own well-being. And so, with that being said, it is reasonable for people to buy in to at least the very foundational thinking of what would eventually become America's workaholic culture. A lot of these ideas of not being dead weight to the community and place around you are baked into human nature. So I don't fault people for thinking this way. In many ways, it's a logical and reasonable thing to say, that it's good to be useful, and it's good to put in the effort for the benefit of the people around you. But where this way of thinking starts to send people wayward is the fact that while we inherently, in terms of our human nature, haven't changed much, the world and economic system and structure of society around us has changed a great deal from when we were living in tribes of 150 people. It turns out that in the modern day capitalist economy that we enjoy in the Western world, there happen to be a lot of caveats, A lot of asterisks, a lot of things that are now counterintuitive, a lot of things that really prey on and take advantage of human intuition, which allowed us to be prosperous for so long. The current financial system has evolved in a way to precisely prey on that good-natured human intuition and to subsequently exploit it and use it against us. Use it in ways that do not benefit us, do not benefit our communities, do not benefit anyone in our lives who we actually care about. The modern financial system is such where you don't really get to see the fruits of your labor, where it's probably the case that regardless of what you do, the actual fruits of your labor are getting picked and transported very far away from your actual world. So at a very basic level, everyone understands that businesses exist to make profit, right? It's like the most fundamental aspect, the most fundamental building block of what business is in a capitalist society. Businesses exist to generate profit. Nothing about what I'm saying is exceptionally groundbreaking, and everyone already knows it. But strangely enough, when you take this extremely plain and factual statement and logically extrapolate it in a certain other way, people all of a sudden start to get really confused and bothered. Because ultimately, for a business to be profitable, what does that imply? Well, all it means is that its revenue exceeds its expenses. It's taking in more money than it has to pay out. If a business does that, it's successful. If a business fails to do that, it's going to go bankrupt and cease to exist. Meaning that if a business exists in the economy, there's a good chance that it's profitable. And if you happen to work for one of these businesses, you and your personal labor are being factored into that equation of profitability. Because by definition, for the business to be profitable, your labor, the value of your labor for the company, has to be worth more to them than they pay out to you. So therefore, if you are the employee of a profitable company, you will be getting paid less than the true economic value of your labor. All this is a simple logical extrapolation based on the definition of profit and the most plainly obvious law of business, in that if a corporation exists, it usually, almost certainly, must be profitable. In order to exist as a business, the business will have to compensate you less than the value you are actually bringing into the company. And I think this is just the part people get hung up on or just fail to acknowledge, is that when you are an employee of a business and you don't have equity or any sort of ownership stake in that business, if you're just an employee whose simple purpose is to engage in a transaction of your time and labor for money in the form of a salary or a wage, you have placed yourself in an inverse value relationship with your employer, where basically, if you follow what the boomer generation says you're supposed to do by working hard for the sake of working hard, then you are depriving yourself of value and adding value to the company. It's really as simple as that. When a company hires you, they are placing a bet that the value of your labor is going to be worth more to them than the money they're paying you. If that doesn't end up being the case, and for whatever reason you're being paid more than you're worth to the company, then that is a net loss for them. You become a liability instead of an asset. And so if you're a worker and you happen to end up on the positive EV side of the equation in your favor, you're probably not going to stick around on the books for very long. Because here's a shocker for all you worker bees out there. The company doesn't care about how much you're taking care of as a valued member of the employee family. If the accounting department at the company sees you as expendable and sees you as a liability, i.e., someone who's not worth the money they're being paid, you'll be gone like that. You'll be off the books. You will be liquidated. And it doesn't matter if you say, oh, I got kids, I got mortgage payment, I got car payment, I'm going into surgery, I need my health insurance, my health benefits. It's not gonna matter if you are deemed as a liability. Just because you get along with people and have magically amicable people skills, that's not gonna matter. Your role to the company is simply going to be another part of the profit-loss equation in whatever Excel spreadsheet they're using to determine the bottom line of profit. And people get distracted. They see huge, eye-popping salary numbers. They see huge bonuses, incredible company benefits, incredible office amenities. And they think to themselves, oh my God, this is so good. I feel so valued. I must be so valuable to this company. Well, you are, but not really in the way you're describing in terms of the income you bring in. Because hey, if you happen to be fortunate enough to work in one of these high-paying, great amenity, great benefit jobs, that's not going to change the way the math works on the profit loss statement. If you're saying, oh hey, my company gave me a brand new Mercedes as a signing bonus, congratulations. For the work you're doing for them to give you that, you're probably earning them the equivalent of 10 Mercedes. Unless you have actual equity or an ownership stake in the company, you will be devalued. Your labor will be devalued. There's a tremendous misconception that a lot of people seem to have while approaching the idea of jobs in the 21st century, where you fire up Indeed.com, look at all the listings, browse the listings, and look at the advertised hourly wage or the advertised salary and think to yourself, oh boy, it's free money. Oh boy, if only it were that simple. If you happen to find something that actually gave out free money, well, congratulations. You will have found the most coveted single piece of information in business, because there's no such thing as free money in the modern day economy. The economy is zero sum. All value comes from somewhere and something. And in most cases, your labor being undervalued for what it actually brings to the company. And I suppose this way of thinking is so reinforced because growing up, we go to school and spend hours and hours working at school and not getting paid. And then we go to college, and as is the circumstance for most college students in America today, you go into massive amounts of debt, so you pay out of your own pocket and out of your own future wages for many, many, many years into the future. You start paying for the opportunity to do work and tests and exams. So by the time you finally hit the job market and, hey, someone's actually paying me to work, it doesn't feel so bad. It's supposed to feel nice and refreshing and normal and sort of like the end state of your abilities as a person. Wow, I'm actually getting paid and compensated for my labor and effort. I must truly be living the dream. So yeah, I suppose it's the case in this country where almost everyone spends the first 21 or 22 years of their lives not being paid to work, or at least if they pick up a job, the jobs available when you're that age pay almost nothing. So by the time you get a real valuable job with your college degree, it feels like all of a sudden the sky's the limit. Whoop-de-doo, I'm getting paid for my labor. It's now become an extremely special and celebratory thing to be paid for your labor. And maybe in that circumstance, you do start to think of it as free money. But fair warning, it is a mistake to believe that there's any source of free money anywhere. No. You're always going to be paying for it in some way. And I guess another reason people in this country feel so blessed to be paid for their labor, and this is especially the case for young people, is that we are taught not to value our time. And that is basically the primary resource you are selling to companies. You are selling your time in exchange for a paycheck. But I can say this right now as someone who's not even that old in the grand scheme of things. Your time, especially as a young person, is way more valuable than you think. It is way more valuable than what most companies compensate you for. I guess if you want to get all philosophical and abstract about it, time is perhaps the least expendable resource that a sentient being can have access to. Because once it's gone, it's gone. There's no adding more seconds or minutes or days or years back on the clock. Once it's gone, it's gone. Once the time has passed you by, you can never get it back. There's always ways to get more money. You can do all sorts of things to get money. I think this is stealing a line from some movie whose name I forget, but never in the history of humanity has any person ever gotten back 1 second of time. You can get money. There are many ways, many pathways to get money, but you can never get your time back. Once it's spent, it's gone for good. But unfortunately, in the United States of America, people are almost taught to play it fast and loose with their time. It's honestly disturbing how certain people in this country, especially this new generation of young people, phone-obsessed, TikTok and mobile game-obsessed young people, it's somewhat disturbing how little people in America these days seem to value their time. And when you're in a country that simultaneously tells you and extols the incredible value and pride that you're supposed to get from working, well, that's how you end up with generations of people who spend 40 years working at a job they hate and walk away from it old, ill, and in failing health with really nothing of value to show for their lives, other than the now increasingly devaluing money that they earned by basically giving up an entire lifetime to provide their labor for some amoral, unknowable company brass who provide no actual benefit to your life whatsoever. And so I guess my general point with all of this is that in the 21st century, we have to rethink the way we look at value. We have to rethink and completely recontextualize what is actually and truly valuable to us as individuals. Because I'm telling you right now, as each day goes by, you are going to get less and less value out of money, especially if that money was given to you in exchange for your time and effort. And the reason that older generations, like the boomers, older generations of Americans, probably believe so strongly in this idea that it is worth it. It is so incredibly worth it to work hard and to devote your labor for some random company that doesn't actually benefit you in any other way besides giving you a paycheck. The reason that boomers believe in working hard so strongly is because they came from a version of the US economy that actually was a lot fairer and more equitable to US labor. They got to personally experience some of the highest wages per capita that any group of people has seen in history. They got to personally experience one of the highest standards of living ever achieved, possibly the highest, out of any cohort of people in world history, in the history of humanity. It was American baby boomers that had access to the absolute highest standard of living, a standard of living that will arguably never be reached again. So, of course, they're going to be more likely to see the value of working hard because their value in the economy was the highest of any group of people in history. Needless to say, the circumstance is quite different today. We are not living in the extremely fruitful and prosperous post-World War II American economy anymore. We are living in an economy where the value of your labor goes down each and every year. And suffice to say, the reason that this prevailing mantra of virtue in hard work has been sticking around for so long is that it's quite valuable for companies and corporations and employers to have the employees believe this. Because unless you happen to be self-employed, like me, which I assume for 95% of you is not the case, then busting your ass for your employer is going to provide value for them and not you. It is in the company's interest for you to work harder. It is not in your individual interest to work harder if you are at, for what is the circumstance for the vast majority of people in the economy, if you are at a large corporation where you don't even get to sniff the owner's feet. Your hard work, your stress, and your working yourself up to the point of exhaustion is for their benefit and not for yours. You are providing them extra value by working harder. And that is realistically why the whole motto of hard work has been emblazoned as this incredibly foundational thing of American culture. Something that every single kid is told and repeatedly told every day of their lives from birth. Trust me, it is helpful for the economy that you work hard. It just might not be that helpful for you. So that's going to pretty much cover it for this leg of the video. But in terms of revealing my true thoughts on this issue, I've only just begun. We've only just begun, folks, because I'm sure there's going to be butthurt people. There's always butthurt people when you bring up the idea that their labor is not as valuable for them as it is for the employer. People take umbrage to the idea of not being valuable. People want to be valued. People want to be told they're valuable. But oftentimes you'll find in the modern economy that value tends to run contrary with work. So next time on the show, I'm going to try to explore how if you want to add value to your life, you're probably not going to get it by working hard. So with that being said, I hope all of you had a valuable time watching this video. Shout outs Lean Ocean.